Selamat sejahtera dan selamat sepupu. Sepupus, I was just invited to the Good Cast show just the other day. Thank you, Vinodh, for having me. And we talked about a whole bunch of things related to politics in Malaysia. Amongst other things, Hadi Awang being a nice man, Siti Masturas.
Sepu? Say what you want to say, man. I came to hear you.
Harvard being a scam. And the concept of the Nepo Baby. And so, we must ask, Sepupus, is Nurul Izzah Anwar a Nepo Baby? Sepupus, Nurul Izzah Anwar is standing for PKR Deputy President. Yes, that's right, she's trying to lead the Parti Keadilan Rakyat. No, but really though, the connection is kind of obvious and the optics are kind of unavoidable. I mean, Nurul Izzah Anwar, like, your dad is the prime minister, your mom registered the party after he went to prison, and now you're running for a spot. You came into parliament, became the princess of Reformasi, and now you're trying to become the successor of Anwar Ibrahim.
Who knows? Future Prime Minister of Malaysia?
Meanwhile, people are citing as evidence that she's maybe not qualified.
The fact that
She's just going out there, talking to grassroots, choosing not to accept a debate request from Rafizi because she wanted people to focus on her track record, which I think is at least partly a mistake.
mainly because name me 3 achievements that Nurul Izzah had in the past 5 years. Quick, no googling.
Even her opponent, Rafizi, tried to throw shade on her by saying that, oh, if you don't vote for Nurul Izzah, then that's as if you're rejecting Anwar. Which kind of comes into that idea of all in the family. But actually, if you think about it, that actually doesn't answer the question, because Nepo Baby has a very specific meaning. See, Nepo Baby comes from the word nepotism. I mean, nepotism is usually defined as the practice of giving jobs, positions of power, or other advantages to relatives or friends, especially by those in power, regardless of their merit. Images abound of incompetent relatives being offered positions in GLCs, companies, becoming directors, coming into work drunk, throwing parties where they bring out entire Jeroboams of champagnes, buy a table, $50,000 night, $100,000 night, $1 billion whale. Now, the important question is though, is it actually a fair image? Well, at least personally, I think it's a bit unfair to go out and label someone as a Nepo Baby just because they're related to someone famous. And to illustrate that, I'm gonna talk about an example from across the causeway. Consider 3rd Singaporean Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong. Now, Mr. Lee was the 3rd Prime Minister of Singapore, one of the most famous
Accusees of being a Nepo Baby in the entire world.
I mean, the man was the son of Lee Kuan Yew, the founding Prime Minister of Singapore. He went on to Parliament, and then later he became Prime Minister after his dad. You can kind of see the parallel here with Miss Nurul Izzah right here. I mean, like, if she actually wins the Deputy Presidency and she takes over Anwar and then becomes Prime Minister, it's basically exactly the same path. Of course, he and Mr. Lee Kuan Yew never actually accepted anyone talking smack about their family, and which is why they basically sued the International Herald Tribune because of their article All in the Family. The Lees won, but I think the optics really just stayed. But I think that Mr. Lee Hsien Loong is a very interesting case because if you were to accuse him of nepotism, you have to show that in fact he was not qualified to do what he eventually did. And when you're talking about somebody who is probably the most academically qualified Prime Minister in the entirety of world history, like, yeah. I mean, the man was a senior wrangler, which basically means like you were literally the top student in the entirety of Cambridge University for literally one of the hardest courses in the entire world. He later on went on to the Harvard Kennedy School where he was the top of the class. He eventually came back to Singapore, became a member of parliament, rose up the ranks, and then became DPM under Goh Chok Tong, and then later on the Prime Minister of Singapore. And oh, if you still want to accuse him of nepotism and you want to say that LKY had everything to do with it, just know that between 2004 to 2024, when he was 3rd Prime Minister of Singapore, he actually ended up quadrupling Singapore's GDP. Now, you have to wonder, right? Like, can you do that just because your parents decided that? Also, Lee Kuan Yew died in 2015, so did he come back from beyond the grave and then raise Singapore's GDP in those extra years. So up until now, you can't actually say that the man is a Nepo baby because his record is too strong. Literally, there was no other prime minister in the entirety of the world for the past 2,000 years who has those kinds of academic qualifications and managed to lead the country in that way. It is at the point that he, with his academic record and everything else, is somebody who can be equal but can never be beaten. But then this brings us back to Nurul Izzah Anwar. I guess you could make an accusation
That okay, there's possibly some nepotism.
she was appointed as senior economic advisor to Anwar Ibrahim in 2023. And even now, people like Che Gubart are going around and saying that her husband Yin Shao Long is now a deputy director of research under Khazanah. That's evidence of Parti Anak Beranak. Now, history can debate all those things here and there, but the fact is that Mr. Yin was working at Khazanah ever since 2020, before even Anwar Ibrahim ended up in the government, and the senior economic advisor role was something that apparently was uncompensated. Anwar himself said that his daughter was extremely qualified, which of course the entire world could very well debate. Maybe the same way people will debate the case of Ram and Hannah Yo, but that's another story. Back to Nurul Izzah for a bit. I don't think that she and her dad are so lawsuit happy. I think they want to convey this idea that they're like the whole reformasi, lemah, lembut, compassion, social justice kinds of people out there. But the thing you need to know about Nurul Izzah Anwar is that she's not dumb. She graduated in international relations from one of the best universities in the world. I don't know, like if you want to go out and say that it's because of her father teaching there that she eventually got an admission. I don't think that's how that works. Whether you think academics are important or not, you have to be a person of a certain level or a certain caliber in order to even be there in the first place. And clearly, Nurul Izzah met that mark. She did a lot of good work on like understanding poverty in like multiple dimensions with this professor named Fatimah Kari, during which she tried to look beyond like just the economic factors to understand like social, political, and environmental aspects, basically to determine what actually constitutes poverty. Before that eventually ended up becoming policy. So that's not really a meaningless thing. Now, of course, you could say that maybe the question of her merit comes up again when she comes back to Malaysia and she ends up becoming an MP for 3 terms before losing the spot to that one Pas Fawaz. I have no idea right there. But see, the other interesting thing also is that even while PKR was in opposition, Nurul Izzah actually advanced like multiple private member bills, which are basically just bills that are advanced by individual members of parliament who are not actually cabinet ministers. And she brought forth, I think, a repeal of the Sedition Act in 2013, repeal of the Printing Presses and Publications Act, Racial and Religious Hate Crime Bill of 2016 to make it a crime for you to take part in race and religious hate speech. God knows we need that right now. Industry, Skills, Education and Training Commission Bill 2018, Revocation of Emergency Bill 2011, and the Petroleum Development Act Amendment, during which she actually advocated for more equitable revenue sharing. Through all of that, she's just maintained this stance on Gaza, which maybe privately concerns me as a citizen of Malaysia because I want her to focus on Malaysia and Malaysia specifically and not necessarily on Gaza. But I respect her principled stand and the way that she's been posting repeated Instagram stories one after another very consistently about the whole Gaza crisis. So good on her on that. Alright, let's dial back a bit. For somebody to be considered a Nepo baby, they have to benefit from favoritism, like they gain a position not just on merit, but only because of their family. You could argue that because she was the daughter of the Prime Minister, therefore she ended up getting elected to Parliament, or she had a family relationship, therefore she ended up getting power. But I think that logic just seems to assume that the moment you're related to somebody who is famous, then you can never achieve their own success, which to me doesn't really make sense. The decision maker has discretionary control and uses it in favor of a relative. I think you could say that that happened in the appointment as senior economic advisor, but in pretty much any other case, I think that she just won her own elections. Conflict of interest. I think it would make sense to say that there was a conflict of interest if Anwar Ibrahim or Wan Azizah awarded her a project or something of that nature, which I don't think is something that actually happened. And institutional access. Maybe you could argue that she has certain kinds of institutional access because, you know, she's the daughter of the Prime Minister and stuff like that.
But remember, she built a lot of this on her own.
But in my mind, none of that is really as bad as the first 3 along the way, because in those cases, it's literally a parent or a relative trying to favor a member of the family for no other reason than that they are related. Whether we think about Lee Hsien Loong or we think about Nurul Izzah Anwar, you see two people with extremely famous parents and probably in some ways have to deal with the fact that their parents have very long and very large shadows, but also people that have achieved successes in their own ways. Of course, you can argue or debate the legacies here and there, but I don't think that you can really make a very clean-cut separation accusation of nepotism or not. I think over the years, she really has developed this ability to actually speak on stage, to actually represent the country in her own right. Of course, you can make the connection that, oh, you were related to this person, you were related to that person. This has destroyed democracy or anything else out there. But at least on my part, I don't see anything that immediately disconfirms this idea that maybe she is a person of merit in her own right. You can say that maybe her disagreements with her father about Azam Baki,
Like, sis, have you not heard of WhatsApp group?
or that her disagreements with her father on certain policy issues are just evidence that father and daughter don't talk to one another. I mean, at least personally, I think the idea that she is in the position that she's in right now, literally only because she has a blood relation to Anwar Ibrahim, is not really something that I can accept. I would not call her a Nepo baby at this point in time, but of course I can see why people might make that association. Maybe it's unavoidable. Maybe she really did some bad things, horrible, and that I didn't talk about to the extent that she is a Nepo baby, and I'm completely wrong.
Of course, if she'd be down to come on Pathways and talk about her worldview, how she thinks about the future of Malaysia and other things, I would be honored to have her.
What do you think, Sepupus? Is Nurul Izzah Anwar a Nepo baby? Let me know down in the comments. Alright, and that's all to say about that, and bye.